marriage to Ruhiyyih Khanum. This part covers the life of Shoghi Effendi from the age of 40 in 1937 to the age of 41 in 1938. And we begin December 1936 to February 1937, an invitation for pilgrimage. But before I get into the story, I want to introduce you to the main source for this part, which is something I'm going to do throughout and which I have done already in the first 10 parts. This book is incredible and it should be on every Baha'i shelf. Violette Nakhjavani was the wife of Ali Nakhjavani and the companion for decades of Hand of the Cause Abdu'l-Bahá Ruhiyyih Khanum. She wrote this two-part series, the Maxwells of Montreal, early years, 1870 to 1922, and middle and late years, 1923 to 1952. This is essentially the biography of three people: Mary Maxwell, William Sutherland Maxwell, and Mary Maxwell, the future Ruhiyyih Khanum. The span of time it covers is from the ministry of Abdu'l-Bahá to the ministry of Shoghi Effendi. And there are so many cables and letters between Shoghi Effendi and this family. The intimacy in this book is absolutely incredible. And in fact, all the primary source material was personally gathered by Ruhiyyih Khanum over the course of many, many decades. So please buy this book if you don't have it. You will just fall in love. Before I talk about the invitation for pilgrimage, I want to pick up where we last left Mary Maxwell off in 1924 when she came on pilgrimage and she was 16 years old. What happened to her between that time of her pilgrimage and the invitation for pilgrimage, which would eventually result in her marrying the guardian? This is a photograph of Mary Maxwell in Greenacre in 1934 at the age of 24 years old. Absolutely stunning and refined. She has a very queenly demeanor, even as a 20-year-old. After leaving Haifa in 1924, Mary Maxwell had blossomed in every sense of the word into an enkindled, active, and very talented servant of the faith. She had a natural ability for writing, and she developed her talents by writing books, articles, plays, and poetry. Her dearest wish and highest hope were to one day become an author, which she would eventually become. Mary was also a born speaker with a natural eloquence. And with the encouragement of Shoghi Effendi, she developed this natural talent by lecturing often. Mary's ardent youthful enthusiasm informed the lectures she gave on the heroic age of the faith in Montreal, Greenacre, Lou Helen, and Esslingen, Germany. From Haifa, Shoghi Effendi closely followed and monitored the development and spiritual training of this remarkable young woman. And he noted her progress in her service to Bahá'u'lláh with very keen interest. He wrote to her mother, Mary Maxwell, once, enclosing precious advice for Mary's personal and spiritual growth. And these are the words of the guardian in a letter. I feel that she should, while pursuing her studies, devote her energies to an intensive study of and vigorous service to the cause, of which I hope and trust she will become a brilliant and universally honored exponent. Over the next 15 years, Mary continued to develop a myriad of rare and precious skills that transformed her into what she would become after her marriage to Shoghi Effendi, which is to say, a perfect instrument of service in the hands of our beloved guardian. Mary studied the Dawnbreakers intensely and wrote a marvelous article covered in this chronology 2 weekends ago, called the Reflorescence of Historical Romance in the Dawnbreakers, or in Nabil. This is just simply a photograph of Mary Maxwell in a play at Greenacre. In this picture, she is taking part in a pageant called the Gate of Dawn. And this is the last scene, and she's dressed as an angel, reciting by heart the farewell message of the Bab to the letters of the living. By November 1935, so 2 years before her marriage, Shoghi Effendi encourages Mary Maxwell's teaching activities in Germany. This is a photograph of Baha'is at the summer school in Esslingen in 1936, where she stayed in Germany for a while after she arrived in 1935. And this is Mary Maxwell seated here. William Sutherland Maxwell and May Maxwell, Mary's parents, left Montreal and arrived in Europe in September 1935. A few weeks later, William Sutherland Maxwell returned to Canada, and Mary was already in Europe when they arrived. She'd arrived a month before them. So between October 1935 and January 1936, Mary Maxwell and Shoghi Effendi exchanged constant letters about Mary Maxwell's service in Germany, with the Guardian guiding her as to where she should go and what she should do. And you can feel through this exchange of letters that you can read in the Maxwells of Montreal in full, almost all the letters. You can feel that there is a bond that is binding Mary Maxwell to her guardian. It is not a bond of romantic love. It is the bond of the covenant between a servant of Bahá'u'lláh and the guardian of the cause of Bahá'u'lláh. And you can really feel that this is the basis of the relationship between Ruhiyyih Khanum and the guardian. In a letter written in October 1935, the guardian added a few words in his own hand, and he says, "I have, in my recent cable addressed to you, dear and distinguished mother, expressed my delight in learning of the progress you have made in learning German and of the efforts you are exerting to teach the cause in Germany. I have also expressed my full approval of the inclination you feel to work for our beloved faith in that land." This is the type of letters that would be exchanged between Shoghi Effendi and Ruhiyyih Khanum for 2 full years before the invitation for pilgrimage. In April 1936, the 21st of April 1936, Mary Maxwell writes an actual report to the Guardian from Rostock, Germany. This is the conference at, oh gosh, I cannot pronounce this, I'm so sorry, Diedrichshagen, a village near Rostock. In the spring of 1936, Mary Maxwell is standing 5th from left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She's right here. So this is, I'm going to read, this is a very long letter. You can go to the chronology to read it. I'm just going to read a few sentences to give you an idea of how Mary Maxwell spoke and wrote to Shoghi Effendi. "My beloved Shoghi Effendi, one of the obvious problems here is that the combinations of race prejudice, fearsomeness, intense championing of policy in government at present." Just want to make a quick stop here and tell you that Hitler was active in Germany at the time she's writing this. So she is speaking of the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany. "When a Baha'i with Jewish blood hears one without it rail against this part of his racial antecedents, it does not help the love or happiness of the community spirit." The letter is very long, but these few sentences give you an idea of the capacity for analysis that Ruhiyyih Khanum has, and the kinds of information she is providing the guardian who is receiving these letters from her, and he is getting a pulse of what Germany is going through as Hitler and the Nazi Party rise to more and more power. On the 1st of May, 1936, the Guardian expresses his gratitude for Mary Maxwell's service. And this absolutely charming photograph, you see Mary Maxwell and Jean Bowles, her cousin, wearing traditional German outfits. Soon after that letter, where she explains the the challenges of teaching in Germany and the societal issues that she is confronted with, especially with regards to Jewish believers, Mary Maxwell received a letter written on behalf of The Guardian that has a postscript in Shoghi Effendi's hands saying, "I am delighted with your accomplishment. My heart is filled with hope and gratitude. I have sent you a cable of appreciation, which I trust you have received. Your recent services will never be forgotten. Rest assured and happy. Your true brother, Shoghi." And this is just another photograph of our beautiful Mary Maxwell in Rothenburg, again in German dress with 2 braids, around 1936 also. And this is another picture. I'm a big fan of Ruhiyyih Khanum. I tried to put every picture I could find in the chronology. This is Mary Maxwell skiing in Bavaria. And finally, on the 8th of December, 1936, The Guardian invites May and Mary Maxwell on pilgrimage. Of course, I forgot to mention this, but it's a little obvious. May Maxwell, Mary's mother, was with her daughter in Germany, traveling around after William Sutherland Maxwell returned to Canada. So this is a photograph of Trieste in Italy. May and Mary Maxwell had been teaching in Germany for about a year, and they had received at least 2 invitations for pilgrimage on the part of The Guardian, if not more. Shoghi Effendi wrote to invite Mary and May Maxwell on pilgrimage on 28 October 1935, and then again in January 1936. By the 29th of May 1936, May and Mary really wanted to go on pilgrimage, but then The Guardian was too exhausted. This was around the time where he would leave for Switzerland because his energy, his life energy would run out around the spring and early summer. Finally, 7 months after that, The Guardian returned from Switzerland fully revitalized and reinvigorated and sent May and Mary a 9-word telegram on the 8th of December, 1936. "Heartily approve your decision. Sail from Trieste. Love both." Neither Mary nor her mother May had any inkling whatsoever what was about to happen in the Holy Land during their pilgrimage. What would happen would change the lives of the Maxwells forever. On the 12th of January, 1937, May and Mary Maxwell arrive in Haifa. This is an aerial photograph of Haifa taken 5 months after they arrived in June 1937. May and Mary Maxwell sailed into Haifa on the 12th of January, 1937, after traveling by train from Hamburg to Italy and then leaving by ship on the 3rd of January from Trieste. They signed their names in the Pilgrim Book as May Bowles Maxwell and Mary Sutherland Maxwell. This would be May Maxwell's 5th and last pilgrimage. Her first pilgrimage as a young woman of 29 years old was in 1898, when she was part of that historic group of pilgrims organized by Phoebe Hearst to be the very first Westerners to meet Abdu'l-Bahá as pilgrims. Her second pilgrimage was in 1909 with her husband. Her third and fourth pilgrimages were in 1923 and 1924 on either end of the Guardian's trip to Switzerland. So when they arrived, they spoke at length to the Guardian about their activities around Europe, and Shoghi Effendi was very happy. He encouraged them. During the first 10 days of their pilgrimage, the Guardian became more acquainted with Mary Maxwell's talents. Mary was 27 years old, and as we've seen, she was stunningly beautiful, but she was also extraordinarily witty, deeply intelligent. She was following in the footsteps of her mother as a deep and talented teacher of the cause, a powerful speaker, and to add to all these other talent, she was a deeply gifted writer. May Maxwell noticed that the more Shoghi Effendi came to know Mary Maxwell, the more he asked about William Sutherland Maxwell and asked Mary to invite him to come to the Holy Land. The Guardian had long been impressed with Mary Maxwell's character and devotion to the faith. 4 months before she came on her second pilgrimage, when she was 16, the Guardian had written to May Maxwell, thanking her for a generous donation to the faith that she had made. And he expressed that Mary would fulfill your fondest hopes and become in time a most radiant light in the firmament of the cause. So he had been nourishing hopes for Mary Maxwell's service to the cause from the time she was 15 years old. And once in a letter, he said about Mary Maxwell that I have the greatest admiration and affection for her. May and Mary spent a heavenly night in Bahá'í on the 22nd of January, 1937, 10 days after their arrival. By late January, February 1937, Shoghi Effendi began tutoring Mary Maxwell. So this is the first verse of Baha'u'llah's hidden words in Arabic. And you see 3 different types of calligraphy that they're in. And this is an illustration for a vignette about calligraphy. A few weeks after Mary's arrival in the Holy Land, Shoghi Effendi, in the course of some unforgettable evenings, gave her a set of reed pens, traditional sort of bamboo-like cut pens that are perfect for writing Persian and Arabic calligraphy. He gave her black ink, and he gave her special papers made from mulberry. And he gently tutored her in Persian calligraphy. And he gave her a set of cards to practice from. And these cards were the hidden words of Baha'u'lláh in 3 different calligraphy styles done by Mishkin Kalam. So I don't know if this is the exact one, but they were cards that were probably identical to this one. The Guardian also gave special attention to Mary's general training and education, showing her a deep kindness and understanding. May Maxwell, for her part, gradually, gently, very gently learned that a marriage proposal was in the workings, mainly through a very confidential conversation that she had with Shoghi Effendi's mother. February to March 1937, the Guardian's proposal and his engagement to Mary Maxwell. 27th of February 1937, a marriage proposal. This is the Maxwell house in Montreal, Canada. This is where William Sutherland Maxwell was. Of course, William Sutherland Maxwell needed to not be in Canada. He needed to be in the Holy Land because something very important was about to happen. On the 26th of February, 1937, May Maxwell sent her husband, William Sutherland Maxwell, in Montreal, a momentous cable, which was delivered to their home on Pine Avenue. Your presence here by March 21st, essential in connection Mary's future happiness. Great destiny. Complete secrecy absolutely essential. Mention to no one. If necessary, use pretext. The cable goes on, but that's the main point. The next day, on the 27th of February, 1937, Mary Maxwell sent her father an extraordinary telegram asking for consent. Daddy, ask your consent for my marriage. Confirm my great happiness. Absolute secrecy required until after wedding and official announcement. Longing for your arrival. Bring original master's cable tablets, please. Cable consent immediately. Your devoted, loving Mary. William Sutherland Maxwell replied the very same day he received her telegram. Surprised and overjoyed, consent granted. Deepest love and devotion, Shoghi, mother, you. Leave Berengaria Wednesday to go via Brindisi. Arrive 15th, Daddy. on the 15th of March, 1937, May Maxwell's letter to Shoghi Effendi. The same day that William Sutherland Maxwell arrived in the Holy Land on the 15th of March, 1937, May Maxwell wrote a very sweet and touching note to Shoghi Effendi on the stationery from the Pilgrim House. Beloved guardian, today I realize more profoundly than ever in my life the deep meaning of the Master's words to me in Montreal. God has perfected all his bounties in you, and this despite my utter unworthiness. Now it is you who take my dear husband to Bahji, and my thankfulness is overflowing. The Guardian's Dream. This is a photograph of Montreal in 1900. At some point before the wedding, Shoghi Effendi had a dream, which confirmed to him that Mary Maxwell was indeed his future wife. Shoghi Effendi dreamt that he was in a large ship sailing for North America. The captain of the ship was Abdu'l-Bahá. They reached the shores of America, and then they boarded a train. And when the train stopped at a station, the guardian looked at the sign and it said, Montreal. Between the 15th and the 24th of March, the engagement of Shoghi Effendi and Mary Maxwell. This is a photograph of Mary Maxwell in the garden of the Western Bahá'í Pilgrim House, very shortly before her marriage to Shoghi Effendi. Mary Maxwell had revered, worshipped the guardian since she had come on her second pilgrimage in 1926 at the age of 15, and she shared the same devotion to Shoghi Effendi as her mother and father did. She had completely given the guardian of the faith her heart and soul, in fact, her entire being. Mary Maxwell herself knew nothing about her upcoming marriage until a week or two later, when one day, as the mimosa trees were in full bloom with their miniature golden suns filled on those branches, Shoghi Effendi's younger sister Mehrangiz told Mary, Shoghi Effendi wants to see you in his room. The guardian always wore a very simple Baha'i ring in the shape of a heart, which his great aunt, the greatest holy leaf, had given him, engraved with the symbol of the greatest name. On the afternoon when he chose Mary Maxwell to be his wife, he took the precious, meaningful ring off his ring finger, placed it on the same ring finger, on the finger of Mary Maxwell's hand, and told her, no one must see that you are wearing it. It would be Shoghi Effendi himself who would sustain Mary Maxwell as she received the most overwhelming news of her life, that she, Mary Sutherland Maxwell, was to become the wife of the guardian of the cause. The 15 minutes that their engagement lasted was the only time they were alone before their marriage on the 24th of March, 1937. Mary Maxwell kept the ring hidden on a chain inside her blouse until the day of the wedding. The little story, though, is that after their marriage, Ruhiyyih Khanum had an exact copy of the ring made, the heart-shaped ring with the greatest name on it, and gave it to the guardian, so he would still have that ring. Both Ruhiyyih Khanum and Shoghi Effendi were buried with this ring on their fingers. On the 24th of March, 1937, Shoghi Effendi and Ruhiyyih Khanum's wedding. 24th of March, 1937, Shoghi Effendi and Ruhiyyih Khanum's visit to Bahji. This is a view of the inside of the shrine of Bahá'u'lláh. The outer part, the inner sanctum, the inner shrine is here. And below the floor is the casket of Bahá'u'lláh in the vault. Over the last 11 Sundays, we have gotten to know Shoghi Effendi well, and it comes as no surprise that his wedding was utterly simple, profoundly spiritual, and perfect in its beauty and simplicity. Truly a wedding to admire and an example to aspire to, instead of the complications of these overwrought wedding events that are common in society. Speaking of the most important aspect of the Guardian's wedding, Ruhiyyih Khanum later stated, drawing a parallel between the Guardian's own simple wedding and Abdu'l-Bahá's equally simple wedding 64 years before, surely the simplicity of the marriage of Shoghi Effendi, reminiscent of the simplicity of Abdu'l-Bahá's own marriage in the prison city of Akka, should provide a thought-provoking example to the Baha'is everywhere. No one knew about the Guardian's wedding. Only people who were informed were the Guardian's parents, Mary Maxwell's parents, and 3 of Shoghi Effendi's siblings, 1 brother and 2 sisters. The Guardian strongly urged everyone to keep the wedding a secret, knowing from his own painful experiences how much trouble major events in the faith could stir up. Because essentially no one was informed about the wedding, it was a shock and a surprise to the servants and the local Baha'is when they saw Shoghi Effendi drive away alone with Mary Maxwell in the car for Bahá'í. At the time, of course, it was unthinkable for 2 people who were not married to be in the same car together. That's why they were shocked. It's not surprising nowadays anymore. So they left together alone for Bahá'í in the afternoon of the 24th of March, 1937. The heart of the Guardian had drawn him to the most sacred spot on the planet at this most important moment in his life. And now this is the inner shrine of Bahá'u'lláh on the same afternoon. When they arrived at Bahá'í, Shoghi Effendi asked Mary Maxwell to give him his ring, the Greatest Holy Leaf's heart-shaped ring. So she gave it to Shoghi Effendi, and he placed the ring on Mary Maxwell's ring finger. This was the only gesture Shoghi Effendi made. Shoghi Effendi entered the inner shrine of Bahá'u'lláh, beneath which Baha'u'llah's sacred remains were interred, gathered up in a handkerchief all the dried petals and flowers that the custodian of the shrine used to take from the threshold and place in a silver receptacle at the feet of Baha'u'lláh. The Guardian and Ruhiyyih Khanum were alone in the inner sanctuary of the shrine of Baha'u'lláh. Shoghi Effendi chanted 2 prayers, and he later told Ruhiyyih Khanum that this was the reality of marriage. Nothing else but those words and the prayers were said. Everything else was silence. When they returned to Haifa, the Guardian's mother took Shoghi Effendi and Ruhiyyih Khanum into the room of the Greatest Holy Leaf. Ruhiyyih Khanum was dressed very simply, all in black. A black skirt suit, black shoes, a black bag, and a small black turban, except for a little white lace blouse. Ruhiyyih, the gift of a new name. Ruhiyyih means spiritual. Just as Fatimeh Khanum had been given a new name by Baha'u'lláh and called Munire, luminous. Shortly before her marriage to Abdu'l-Bahá, the Guardian bestowed a new name on Mary Maxwell the day they were married. From this moment on, Mary Maxwell was no more. She would be known as Ruhiyyih Khanum. Ruhiyyih meaning spiritual, and Khanum indicating that she was a lady. The 24th of March, 1937, the wedding ceremony in Haifa. This is the photograph of the steps leading to the entrance of the house of Abdu'l-Bahá. To Ruhiyyih Khanum, the fact that Shoghi Effendi chose to get married in the greatest Holy Leaf's own bedroom was the most revealing gesture of the intense love he had for Ruhiyyih Khanum, his great aunt, who had passed away 5 years before. Everything in the greatest Holy Leaf's room had been perfectly preserved, just as it was in her days. As Ruhiyyih Khanum and Shoghi Effendi stood beside her bed, hand in hand, they had the simple Bahá'í marriage ceremony, each repeating the verse for marriage in Arabic. First, the verse pronounced by Shoghi Effendi, Inna kullun lillah radun. We will all verily abide by the will of God. Then the verse pronounced by Ruhiyyih Khanum, Inna kullun lillah radiyat. We will verily all abide by the will of God. That was the marriage of the beloved guardian. As Ruhiyyih Khanum beautifully stated, there was no celebration, no flowers, no elaborate ceremony, no wedding dress, no reception. Dast bidast, the Persian wedding tradition. To illustrate a story about a wedding tradition, this is a 19th century Persian wedding scene portrayed in a Qajar pottery tile. After the recital of the Baha'i marriage vows in the room of the greatest Holy Leaf, Ruhiyyih Khanum, the mother of Shoghi Effendi, placed Ruhiyyih Khanum's hand in the hand of her son, according to the old Persian tradition of dast bidast. In traditional Persian culture, only a husband and wife could hold hands. When Ruhiyyih Khanum placed Ruhiyyih Khanum's hand in Shoghi Effendi's hand, it was a solemn act in Persian culture, signifying that they were now husband and wife, hand in hand, dast bidast. The symbolism of dast bidast is that the husband and wife's hands are now joined together forever, for the rest of their lives and under the protection of God. Ruhiyyih Khanum's letter to her parents. This is the only photograph of the three Maxwells together, May Maxwell, William Sutherland Maxwell, and Mary Maxwell. Ruhiyyih Khanum recorded the historic event of their marriage in her father's daily memorandum book. It was a beautiful album that her father owned, made of red and black letters, tooled in gold. And what she wrote was this: Mary Sutherland Maxwell, daughter of William Sutherland and May Ellis Maxwell, was married to Shoghi Effendi, first guardian of the Baha'i faith, on March 24th, 1937 at Haifa, Palestine. The same day as her wedding, Ruhiyyih Khanum wrote a lovely, moving, short letter to her parents addressed to mother and daddy. My dearest, dearest ones, on this most glorious day of my life, how can I ever thank you both enough to express my love to you for the life you gave me, from all your devotion to me, the example of your own happy marriage that gave me an ideal in life, the beauty of our homes has enriched my soul. From you both, I have woven into me so many characteristics that I hope now will be of service to the guardian of the cause. Surely no child ever had two better, more loving parents than I. And as you have always been my pride and my dearests and my joy, so in my new life you will always continue to be your faithful Mary. 24 March 1937, immediately after the wedding. This is another photograph of the Western Pilgrim House at 4 Haparsim across the street from Ruhiyyih Khanum's new home. After the marriage ceremony, Ruhiyyih Khanum and Shoghi Effendi exited the Greatest Holy Leaf's room, and both families greeted and embraced them. Later, Shoghi Effendi and Ruhiyyih Khanum, his new Canadian wife, stopped by the Pilgrim House and were embraced by the pilgrims, utterly overwhelmed with joy. May Maxwell dwelt on the spiritual honor and responsibility which this marriage had bestowed on the Maxwell family. Shoghi Effendi's parents signed their marriage certificate, and afterwards Shoghi Effendi returned to work, and Ruhiyyih Khanum went back to the Western Pilgrim House with some of Abdu'l-Bahá's family members. Shoghi Effendi rejoined them at dinner time when he showered his love and congratulations on William Sutherland and May Maxwell. And during dinner, Fujita, Saichiro Fujita, carried Ruhiyyih Khanum's suitcases to her new home with the guardian, the house of the master. He also took the handkerchief filled with precious flowers that he had gathered earlier that day and gave the guardian had gathered these precious flowers from the shrine of Baha'u'lláh, and he gave them to May Maxwell, saying that he had gathered them for her at the shrine of Baha'u'lláh. And William Sutherland and May Maxwell signed the marriage certificate after dinner. And shortly after their marriage, while Ruhiyyih Khanum's parents were still in Haifa, Shoghi Effendi would tell Mary Maxwell, Ruhiyyih Khanum, over dinner one night, that one of the reasons he had chosen her daughter as his wife was because Mary Maxwell was the daughter of May Maxwell. So I'm going to summarize this very briefly. Of course, the families in Canada were informed of the wedding and they were overjoyed, and cables back and forth of congratulations and happy wishes and just a lot of joy around this perfect match, really. 27th of March, 1937, the guardian's marriage is publicly announced. And so this is how the marriage was announced. It was a cable from Ruhiyyih Khanum, the mother of Shoghi Effendi, that said, "Announce assembly, celebration, marriage, beloved guardian, stop, inestimable honor conferred upon handmaid of Baha'u'lláh, Ruhiyyih Khanum, Miss Mary Maxwell, stop. Union of East and West proclaimed by Baha'i faith, cemented. Signed, Ruhiyyih, mother of the guardian." A similar cable was sent to the friends in Iran. And I'm going to skip over this because you can go to the chronology and read the congratulation messages yourselves. But there were congratulation responses from communities all around the world, contributions from every LSAs of certain countries, John and Louise Bosch, the Baha'is of Ishqabad, some very important congratulation messages the Guardian responded to personally, but most were just congratulations that didn't need any responses. Very soon after their wedding, 5 days after their wedding, 5 days? Yes, 5 days after their wedding, the Grossman family came on pilgrimage. And this is actually a painting, a watercolor of the garden of the house of Abdu'l-Bahá, done by Hermann Grossman. He's a very talented watercolor artist from his pilgrimage. They were the first pilgrims to arrive after the wedding. And Shoghi Effendi joined the Grossmans in the Western Pilgrim House in the company of his young and beautiful wife, Ruhiyyih Khanum. And of course, the Grossmans were from Germany, and Ruhiyyih Khanum had spent so much time in Germany, and she spoke German. And so it was just such a joy for them to reconnect because they loved her very, very much. And their congratulations were just so enthusiastic. And the Guardian responded that he had wanted to unite East and West through his marriage and hoped that through Ruhiyyih Khanum, the bond with the German Baha'is would grow especially strong, which is sort of interesting because Germany was very important in the life of Abdu'l-Bahá, the grandfather of Shoghi Effendi. Abdu'l-Bahá had a very, very deep, intimate bond with Germany and the German Baha'is. The last tablet Abdu'l-Bahá ever wrote before his ascension was to the German Baha'is. And so now the Guardian, his grandson, had married a young woman who had very strong ties to Germany as well. Though I just wanted to show you just how talented Mr. Grossman was. This is another watercolor of the mansion of Bachi that he made. A little change in content. This is now 6 April 1937, Prayers and Meditations by Baha'u'lláh. I don't think that this book gets the love it deserves. It is a very large book. And the Guardian spent a long time translating it. I don't think people read it enough. It was immediately after his masterpiece of the Gleanings from the Writings of Bahá'u'lláh that Shoghi Effendi began working on what Ruhiyyih Khanum described as a companion volume to Gleanings, Prayers and Meditations by Bahá'u'lláh. It is a collection of 184 prayers and meditations revealed in Persian and Arabic, and sometimes mixed Persian and Arabic, by Baha'u'lláh throughout the 40 years of his ministry. The Guardian called this bouquet a diamond mine of communion with God. It is a work of extraordinary, superlative translation, and it was 339 pages long. And in late 1936, Shoghi Effendi sent the first installment of his translations to George Townsend, who wrote back and said, "It's wonderful. There is nothing like it in the world." Just very, 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 very beautiful. There are 4 categories of selections in prayers and meditations by Baha'u'lláh. The first categories are prayers revealed for special occasions. So obligatory prayers, prayers for the dead, for Riḍván, for Nowruz, for the fast, for intercalary days. The second category in prayers and meditations is prayers for holy day commemorations, such as the Tablet of Visitation, for example. The third category is prayers for daily life, which we're very familiar with. Traveling, protection, children, detachment, steadfastness, forgiveness, spiritual progress, healing, these kinds of prayers. And the fourth category is meditations on mystical and spiritual topics, God's bountiful grace, Baha'u'llah's sufferings, Baha'u'llah's evanescence in the face of God's will. The longest of these meditations is a 22-page selection. And the purpose of this category, which was included by the Guardian Prayers and Meditations, was to really encourage Baha'is to practice personal reflection. I'm going to skip reading an excerpt from this because I need to get to the end of the section and I don't want to keep you guys too long. Now for something really epic making. Riḍván, 1937, the first 7-year plan. Shoghi Effendi's vision for Abdu'l-Bahá's Tablets of the Divine Plan. In 1937, Shoghi Effendi inaugurated the first epoch in the implementation of Abdu'l-Bahá's Tablet of the Divine Plan. So there are several types of epochs in the faith. You have the main epochs that are related to the heroic age and the formative age. But then you have another type of epoch, which is related to specifically the tablets of the divine plan. So the tablets of the divine plan were revealed in 1916, 1917, and made public in 1919. And they are going to be the main framework for every teaching plan for the formative age for the next thousands of years. Everything is going to rest on the tablets of the divine plan. So the tablets of the divine plan have their own epochs. And in 1937, Shoghi Effendi inaugurated the first epoch because he inaugurated the first plan based on the original teaching plan by Abdu'l-Bahá, which was those 14 tablets of the divine plan. And so 16 years after beginning his ministry, it was finally time to inaugurate the Abdu'l-Bahá's Tablets of the Divine Plan in the world. And so that's why the first epoch began in 1937. Abdu'l-Bahá's Tablets of the Divine Plan, these are samples of the first tablets of the divine plan that were mailed during World War I before mail was stopped. I think they only managed to send 5, and the rest of the 8 were put with the original 5 in a vault in the Shrine of the Bab. and they were hand carried to New York by Ahmad Sohrab. But the few that made it to America before mail was stopped were written on the front and back of postcards in English and in Arabic or Persian. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the prosecution of Abdu'l-Bahá's tablets of the divine plan. There were 3 crusades that Shoghi Effendi implemented to prosecute Abdu'l-Bahá's plan in these 14 tablets. The first crusade was called the First 7-Year Plan addressed to the Baha'is of the United States and Canada, 1937, 1944. The second crusade, second 7-year plan, also United States and Canada, 1946, 1953. You're going to notice there's a 2-year gap here. We're going to cover this in subsequent parts, but this was a 2-year break. Essentially, the Second World War was ending, and so there was just a break in the plans. It resumed after the war had ended. And the Third Crusade, which we know as the 10-year crusade from 1953 to 1963, which the Guardian would live through half of it. And after that, they were the plans of the Universal House of Justice, and we are currently in the 9-year plan. So there were 3 goals for the first 7-year plan. The first one was to complete the exterior ornamentation of the house of worship. The second goal was 1 local spiritual assembly in every state of the United States and every province in Canada. And the third goal was 1 center in every country in Central and South America. So that happened right after, 1 month after Shoghi Effendi and Ruhiyyih Khanum's marriage. Now I want to go back and revisit Shoghi Effendi and Ruhiyyih Khanum's marriage. I want to revisit the most important aspect of their marriage. Shoghi Effendi and Ruhiyyih Khanum, East and West. The significance of this union, the significance of this marriage. And this is, I put this together. I chose, obviously there was an age difference because the Guardian was 40 when he was married and Ruhiyyih Khanum was 27. But I tried to find 2 photographs of them around the same age. This is Shoghi Effendi at the age of 22. This is Ruhiyyih Khanum at the age of 16. There are no photographs of the beloved Guardian and Ruhiyyih Khanum together. None. And this is mostly not an accident. There's several important points to mention when it comes to Shoghi Effendi's marriage to Ruhiyyih Khanum. The first is that this was a marriage between the guardian of the faith of Baha'u'lláh, the grandson of Abdu'l-Bahá, the great-grandson of Baha'u'lláh, and the daughter, the Western, Canadian, Montreal-born, Caucasian daughter of 2 stalwart, prominent, faithful, dedicated Baha'is. She herself would later be elevated to the rank of hand of the cause. So this is not just anyone. She is Baha'i royalty. She is her father will be elevated to rank of hand of the cause. Her mother will be elevated to the rank of martyr. She herself will be a hand of the cause. This is as much Baha'i royalty as you can get. There is also the very powerful connection with Abdu'l-Bahá. Mary Maxwell had not been able to have a child. And in 1909, when she came on her second pilgrimage, Abdu'l-Bahá asked her if she wanted one, and she said, I want whatever Baha'u'lláh wants for me. And Abdu'l-Bahá said, that's a very good answer. That's a very good answer. And Mary Maxwell was born the next year. 2 years later, Abdu'l-Bahá had stayed in their home, the only private home he visited in Montreal. And he absolutely adored Mary. And Mary was the Persians say shaytun, Like, she was very naughty. Abdu'l-Bahá wanted to give her a kiss, and she didn't want. And so she slapped Abdu'l-Bahá so hard his turban fell to the floor. But eventually he was able to cuddle with her, and she would just climb up and sleep with him on the chair when he was resting. And when she planted that slap on Abdu'l-Bahá, her mother was so horrified, she wanted to punish her. And what Abdu'l-Bahá said was, leave her alone. She is the essence of sweetness. But the most important thing, I think, that should forever be associated with the guardian's marriage to Ruhiyyih Khanum is that it was the union of East and West. And the earth is but one country is really a central teaching of the Baha'i faith. And the guardian, who is from pure Persian blood, Persian royalty, actually, literally, marrying sort of a royalty of Western blood, pure like Scottish, English blood, is sort of an illustration of one of the most celebrated verses by Bahá'u'lláh. It is not for him to pride himself who loveth his own country, but rather for him who loveth the whole world. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens. Abdu'l-Bahá often said things like this: the East and West must unite to give to each other what is lacking. This union, which was a union, a marriage, will bring about a true civilization where the spiritual is expressed and carried out in the material. Another aspect of their marriage is that by marrying the daughter, a young American woman, North American woman, Shoghi Effendi was in fact bestowing honor on North America. The National Spiritual Assembly of the United States and Canada informed the Guardian that they had sent $19 from each of their 71 local spiritualist assemblies. And that was a total of $1,349 in 1937. Calculated with inflation, this is pretty much $30,000 today. 2 days later, the Guardian responded that he was very touched. But shortly after the marriage, the Guardian gave permission to the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States and Canada. He said, approve public announcement, emphasize significance, institution guardianship, union East-West, and linking destinies, Persia-America, allude, honor, conferred British people. So, just give me a minute. Apart from Abdu'l-Bahá and the Greatest Holy Leaf and Ruhiyyih Khanum, the widow of Abdu'l-Bahá, Shoghi Effendi's family, after the passing of Ruhiyyih Khanum, would betray him, all of them. There would basically be no member of Abdu'l-Bahā's family left standing under the shadow of the covenant. But what's very fascinating is what I'm about to tell you in the next story, is that by marrying Ruhiyyih Khanum, Shoghi Effendi entered a family that was wholly steadfast and devoted to the cause. The Maxwells of Montreal, Shoghi Effendi's new family. This is a portrait of Mary Maxwell. May Maxwell. She is now the Guardian's mother-in-law. And I'm going to try to summarize this greatly because I am pressed for time. But in marrying Ruhiyyih Khanum, Shoghi Effendi had gained a faithful Baha'i family, one that would remain faithful forever, remain steadfast forever, remain under the covenant forever. Both May Maxwell, his mother-in-law, and William Sutherland Maxwell, his father-in-law. And this is a very beautiful picture of a young May Ellis Bowles at the age of 14. And she was just, she had rare qualities. She had the ability to forge enduring bonds of friendship, eager for the truth, and just empathy that was like an ocean. And she was so detached, her feelings never got hurt. And she was immensely original and profoundly spiritual. A little thing you may not know about May Bowles is that she had really terrible health. She was very, very healthy until the age of 21. And then after that, she was never able to walk more than a block, but she still served constantly. She never really got a diagnosis, so we never really ever found out what was wrong with her. From the moment that she met Abdu'l-Bahá, she was just deeply, deeply devoted to him, and many people entered the faith through her who made history, like Thomas Breakwell, and who was very beloved by Abdu'l-Bahá, and he wrote a very touching tablet of visitation for him, and the first French Baha'i, Hippolyte Dreyfus. This is around her first pilgrimage in 1898. And from the moment she met Abdu'l-Bahá, she just served nonstop until her dying breath during the ministry of the Guardian. Abdu'l-Bahá would say of May Bowles, her company uplifts and develops the soul. So she was really responsible for building the Baha'i community in Paris. And she went on pilgrimage with her husband in 1909. Then after that, in 1910, her daughter was born. And then Abdu'l-Bahá visited them in Montreal, and he said, "This is my home." But he didn't just say that. He said, "This is my home. All that is in it is mine. You are mine, your husband and child. This is my home." And I think it's quite acceptable to read this as sort of Abdu'l-Bahā's infallibility, knowing that that little girl would eventually marry his grandson. That's the way that Abdu'l-Bahá speaks to the Maxwells is so uncharacteristically intimate and filled with love and so much certainty, so much encouragement. The bond between the two families is strong even before Shoghi Effendi is born or Mary Maxwell is born. It's a bond between the family, this Canadian family, and the family of Bahá'u'lláh. The other member of the family is William Sutherland Maxwell. And William Sutherland Maxwell is just an amazing individual. This is a picture of a young Sutherland Maxwell with a beautiful beret and May Ellis Bowles in 1900 in Pierrefonds, France. And he was described by Ruhiyyih Khanum as one of those souls whose nature is all goodness. This is what led the guardian of the Baha'i faith to attest to his saintly life in his obituary cable. He didn't become a Baha'i right away, but then during his pilgrimage in 1909, this was during the pilgrimage when they were traveling to Akka on the beach in horse-drawn carriages. He became very enkindled after experiencing Abdu'l-Bahā's presence during his pilgrimage. And one of the most important things about Sutherland Maxwell is that he was really a consummate artist. This is him in Germany with Alphonse Grassel and his daughter Mary. And he was a famous architect. He designed the Chateau Frontenac. He designed the lines of this 20-story hotel, along with the wrought iron railings, the furniture, the grills, the lamps, the ceilings, the elevator, interiors. I mean, he was he was so dedicated to his work that at one point he took a gouge from a woodcarver and he would like sweeten the lines himself. You know, he was really hands-on, very passionate about beauty and harmony and great and the grace and gracefulness of drawings. He was a talented painter. He drew his own sketches for architectural plans, and we will see a lot of his work later on in the chronology as we get closer to the archives and the Shrine of the Bab and the details of the Shrine of the Bab. So between the 24th of March and the 30th of May, the Maxwells, May Maxwell and William Sutherland Maxwell, spent 2 months in the Holy Land after their daughter was married. This is a photograph of Agnes Alexander and May Maxwell. May Maxwell was, as I mentioned, her health was poor. She was ill for most of the time during these 2 months. And her husband, William Sutherland Maxwell, was at her side when she had the worst of the fevers, and she was in a state of emotional upheaval. She was at the same time ecstatic about the honor bestowed on her family and her daughter's happy marriage, but she was also filled with sorrow at the idea of being separated from her daughter, who she had loved and been at like next to for almost 30 years. She was losing that daughter. So it was a difficult time for her, but it was also a happy time. This is just a very, very beautiful story. I remember I first read this story when I was in my 20s, and I was traveling through Madagascar. I think I read it in the home of the pioneers, the McHugh family. At the beginning of her marriage, Shoghi Effendi recommended to Ruhiyyih Khanum that she memorize a prayer by Abdu'l-Bahá that begins, "O Lord, my God and my haven in my distress, my shield and my shelter in my woes." And the famous line in the penultimate paragraph of this prayer says, "Loose my tongue to laud thy name amidst thy creatures, that my voice may be raised in great assemblies, and from my lips may stream the flood of thy praise." For the rest of her life, Ruhiyyih Khanum would attribute her legendary power of public speaking to Shoghi Effendi's advice to her in the early days of her marriage to memorize this prayer of Abdu'l-Bahá. And this is a talk that she gave in India where she said this. The Maxwells leave Haifa. If you want to go to the chronology, you can read the farewell letter of May Maxwell to the Guardian. And then they actually leave on the day of their departure, on the 30th of May, 1937. May Maxwell tells her daughter, Ruhiyyih Khanum, "Mary, do you think the Guardian will kiss me goodbye?" Ruhiyyih Khanum hadn't even crossed her mind, that option, that the Guardian would kiss her mother. So, but, you know, she casually mentioned it to Shoghi Effendi, that her mother had said this. And the Maxwells were leaving that afternoon. And after lunch, the Guardian went to see May Maxwell in her room at the Western Pilgrim House. Then after he left, Ruhiyyih Khanum went to see her mother, and her mother was beaming. And her eyes were shining like 2 stars. And she told Ruhiyyih Khanum, "He kissed me." This is the SS Narkunda, the ship that William Sutherland and May Maxwell sailed on, the actual ship that they sailed on. So they left, and on the next day, on the 31st of May, and how thoughtful was the Guardian? He sent a cable to the captain of the SS Narkunda and said, "With you both always, Shoghi." And Ruhiyyih Khanum sent a cable to the ship to her parents the next day, June 1st, and said, "Loving you both tenderly, very happy, our great blessings, Ruhiyyih." June 1937 to the year 1938, the passing of Queen Marie of Romania. But first, June to fall 1937, the passing of beloved Mr. Hauser. This is a picture that from Guardian of the Bahá'í Faith that Ruhiyyih Khanum titled "On Top of the World." This is, for some years, Shoghi Effendi had a bicycle. He was absolutely fearless, biking up. I would never do this. But anyway, he was biking up and down these, oh, it's so scary with his bicycle. For many, many years, Shoghi Effendi had always gone to stay in the inn of Mr. Hauser. And when Shoghi Effendi took Ruhiyyih Khanum to Interlaken in Switzerland for the first time in the summer of 1937, a few months after their marriage, he was so looking forward to introducing his new wife to Mr. Hauser, his beloved Swiss mountain guide, in whose cabin he had stayed every summer since his first year as guardian in 1922. He'd become so attached to Mr. Hauser, and they were close friends, often writing to each other when Shoghi Effendi was in Haifa. Mr. Hauser was a very good friend to Shoghi Effendi. He always listened with great interest to Shoghi Effendi's account of his day's hike or climb, and he constantly marveled at Shoghi Effendi's endless energy and determination. But when they arrived, Shoghi Effendi learned that Mr. Hauser had passed away. And so he took Ruhiyyih Khanum with him to the peaceful mountain cemetery, so he, the guardian of the faith, could pay his respect to his dear friend of 15 years, this wonderful Swiss mountain guide. I want to just say a few words about Shoghi Effendi's love of Switzerland. This is a beautiful photograph of the area around Zermatt, showing both the famed Matterhorn mountain with its very distinctive profile and the train line on the bottom here. But I'm just going to keep this view here because it's such a beautiful mountain. In all the years that Ruhiyyih Khanum traveled with Shoghi Effendi, she noticed that he never formed personal relationships during his trips, and he rarely spoke to strangers. Ruhiyyih Khanum was very sociable, and so she would often leave their compartment in the train and have exciting conversations with passengers on the train because she loved to meet new people. But there was one exceptional, memorable incident. Once, Ruhiyyih Khanum and Shoghi Effendi were on a train leaving Zermatt, on a train. So that's why I chose this picture, because there's a train and then there's Zermatt. And they were seated on wooden seats in the third-class compartment. And there's this lovely young man, a descendant of Russian immigrants to the United States, who was facing the Guardian. And it was his first trip to Switzerland. And Shoghi Effendi began to speak to him, very enthusiastically, giving him travel advice on which places he should not miss seeing while he was in Switzerland. And then Shoghi Effendi pulled out his guide of the Swiss railways, and he showed him which trains to take, where to go, when to go, how to get there. Ruhiyyih Khanum just sat back and watched her guardian speaking to this young Russian American, and she saw how this youth was so pleased with Shoghi Effendi's attention, and just how much the guardian loved Switzerland with all his heart in so many ways. And even speaking about the place that he loved to a stranger he would never see again was a joy for Shoghi Effendi. Uh-oh, we're coming to a red section. You know what that means. 20 December 1937, Mirza Muhammad Ali. Okie dokie. On the 20th of December, 1937, Mirza Muhammad Ali, the archbreaker of the covenant of Bahá'u'lláh and Abdu'l-Bahá's half-brother, died. And this was the cable Shoghi Effendi sent. The hand of omnipotence has removed the archbreaker of Baha'u'llah's covenant, his hopes shattered, his plottings frustrated, the society of his fellow conspirators extinguished. God's triumphant faith forges on, its unity unimpaired, its purpose unsullied, its stability unshaken. Such a death calls for neither exaltation nor recrimination, but evokes overwhelming pity at so tragic a downfall, unparalleled in religious history. I don't want to read this story. I don't think it's going to bring anything to the main line that I want to follow today. It was just a person who is not a Baha'i, came to the Holy Land and recorded his impressions of Shoghi Effendi. If you are curious, you can go to the chronology and read it. Because I really want to come to this now. This is the passing of Queen Marie of Romania. And there is a very short YouTube video. Wait, hold on. Let me just reshare my screen because I think that I may not have shared my share screen. Okay. Can you hear the sound? Yes, no? This is the, okay, you can't hear the sound. Doesn't matter. It's the cortege passing through Bucharest, and it's the funeral of Queen Marie of Romania. And if you're interested, you can see the video in full at the website. She was the daughter of the Duke of Edinburgh. So Queen Marie of Romania never hesitated and never wavered in her faith in Baha'u'lláh. After she became a Baha'i, she widely publicized her beliefs. And her son, King Carol II, set out to destroy her reputation when he became the king. But she refused to leave her country. She was always very devoted to Romania. And she stayed either at Bran Castle in southern Transylvania or Balchik Palace, a residence she had built. Martha Root had 6 interviews with the Queen. Her last one was in 1936 in Contreceni Palace. And that was during this interview that Queen Marie spoke at length about the powerful translation by Shoghi Effendi of gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'lláh. She said even doubters would find a powerful strength in this book should they read it alone and give their time soul to expand. Queen Marie died on the 18th of July, 1938 at 5:38 p.m. from complications due to pancreatic cancer. And she was buried 5 days later on the 23rd of July. She was a very prolific author. She had written 34 books during her lifetime. And she published an critically acclaimed autobiography called The Story of My Life, in which she had a beautiful line that reads, "Words are dangerous things, let us remember. A republic might be brought into being by a poem." She was a descendant of Queen Victoria, one of the only monarchs whom Baha'u'lláh addressed who had not rejected him outright and impudently. Queen Marie would live down in history as the very first royal to embrace the faith of Baha'u'lláh. 1938, Saichiro Fujita in the Holy Land before World War II. Saichiro Fujita was the second Japanese Baha'i. He declared in Oakland, California. He arrived in the Holy Land in January 1920 with the Abdu'l-Bahá's 7-seater Cunningham automobile. And he assisted Curtis Kelsey in installing electricity in various Baha'i properties. And the future hand of the cause, Siegfried Schopfloscher, came to the Holy Land in 1921. And he became a Baha'i after having a single conversation with Saichiro Fujita. After Abdu'l-Bahá's ascension, Saichiro Fujita continued to serve Shoghi Effendi for many years. And he returned to Japan for a 3-month vacation in 1936, came back for 2 years in the Holy Land. And in 1938, with the fast approach of World War II, Shoghi Effendi asked Saichiro Fujita, concerned for his safety and the mounting prejudice against the Japanese, to return to Japan. In his own words in an interview, Saichiro Fujita said that Shoghi Effendi told him, "Go back to Japan. War is coming." 1938, Ruhiyyih Khanum's new life as the wife of the Guardian. This is a photograph from the 19th century of a Persian young woman, about the age that Ruhiyyih Khanum was when she got married. And I put this Persian young woman here to talk about the clash of cultures, because when Ruhiyyih Khanum married the Guardian, she was very headstrong, very outspoken, very frank young woman of Western culture. And she married a traditional Persian family. And so there was a difficult period of adjustment. She was parted forever from her beloved parents and from the culture that she knew, from her anything that was familiar to her, even food. And her former home was thousands and thousands of kilometers away. And she was living with all of her in-laws and their children, aunts, uncles, and cousin, all under the same roof. The Guardian had married a Canadian wife, and Ruhiyyih Khanum had entered a Persian household. Patiently and lovingly and with immense kindness, Shoghi Effendi helped her navigate the cultural divide. He taught her Persian. He helped her get acquainted with the ways of the Persian household. The greatest obstacle was the language, but she eventually learned Persian and spoke it fluently. The family of Shoghi Effendi all spoke English, but they still communicated in Persian exclusively. And the jokes would just fly right over Ruhiyyih Khanum's head, which no doubt must have made her feel left out. But Ruhiyyih Khanum had married her beloved, and she threw herself, heart and soul, into her new life and her new destiny. And it was a task that required rigorous discipline. Shoghi Effendi was her main teacher, and that was also an adjustment because she was mostly self-taught. She liked to study on her own. But for this, she needed a guide. And so she needed to adjust to needing a teacher. Ruhiyyih Khanum was a phenomenal student. She was very, very conscientious. And under Shoghi Effendi's kind of strict tutelage, she applied herself and learned her way around a Persian household and learned Persian. It's a very short story about reverence. Shoghi Effendi teaching his new Western wife Persian reverence. It's a great illustration of the kind of culture shock that she would have encountered. So after her parents returned to Canada, they sent Ruhiyyih Khanum all of her favorite things, her books, her bookcases, and a framed portrait of Abdu'l-Bahá. Ruhiyyih Khanum took that beautiful portrait of Abdu'l-Bahá and she put it on the bookshelf with the books that was facing the bed. So if she was lying in bed, her feet would be facing the portrait of Abdu'l-Bahá. When Shoghi Effendi saw this, he immediately said, "You put the master at your feet." Ruhiyyih Khanum was startled by the intensity of Shoghi Effendi's reaction. She said, of course I did, because first thing I want to see when I wake up is the photograph of Abdu'l-Bahá. And Shoghi Effendi reversed that logic on her and explained to her that the portrait of Abdu'l-Bahá should always be above your head. It's not necessarily because you want to see it first thing in the morning. It has to be above your head, not at your feet. At your feet is a sign of disrespect. And Ruhiyyih Khanum realized with a shock that the Guardian had just taught her something she never even knew existed, that there is a geography to a room. Like there's the head of the room and the foot of the room in terms of reverence, in terms of Bahá'í pictures and the picture of Abdu'l-Bahá. So this was a learning moment for her. 1938, Ruhiyyih Khanum life. This is another picture of young Ruhiyyih Khanum and young Shoghi Effendi. Ruhiyyih Khanum said, just adored Shoghi Effendi, and she once wrote to her mother in a letter. She said, "If anyone asked me what my theme in life was, I would say Shoghi Effendi." She also wrote a letter to her mother in December 1939 and said, "It is not only through my passionate love for this great Baha'i faith, but through my love for, oh, wait, hold on. This is, wait, hold on. Ruhiyyih Khanum believed that any service to the cause performed by one of the Maxwells was a shared blessing for all of the Maxwells. And this is a theme she echoed in a beautiful letter that her mother, Mary Maxwell, wrote her in December 1939. It is not only through my passionate love for this great Baha'i faith, but through my love for her and yearning to be more worthy of her that I have considered going to South America to teach." So this is the new phase in Mary Maxwell's life. She wants to become a pioneer. She has this idea in 1939, and tragically, she will be felled in her path a couple of years later when she does accomplish that goal. This is a story about Shoghi Effendi's forbearance. Forbearance is more than patience. It's patience and acceptance. And this is something I absolutely love because I can relate to Ruhiyyih Khanum. Shoghi Effendi was an immaculately tidy person. Ruhiyyih Khanum, in her own words, "I am without a doubt one of the untidiest people I have ever met." But Shoghi Effendi, in 20 years of marriage, never, ever, ever criticized Ruhiyyih Khanum for her lack of tidiness. This is what Ruhiyyih Khanum had to say about it. And it is probably the most intimate vignette she has ever shared on her marriage to Shoghi Effendi. And I am personally shocked that we have access to this because it's very unlike Ruhiyyih Khanum to say something like this. But these are her words. "Shoghi Effendi, I have always considered to be one of these signs in a small scale of the greatness of his character was that he never reproached me for being untidy. And I've always thought, and I appreciated it very, very deeply, that he never once in 20 years rebuked me for being untidy or asked me to become tidy." This story is the epitome of the guardian's loving kindness, his compassion, his patience, his acceptance, his forbearance, his empathy. It's also a testament to how much he loved and respected his wife, not to let an unimportant difference in lifestyles even be mentioned between husband and wife. Ruhiyyih Khanum once said that one of the differences between her and Shoghi Effendi in terms of living was, as great as his genius is for getting things tidy, mine is for getting my room untidy. Shoghi Effendi's love of little things. Shoghi Effendi loved little things. He had a very nice old-fashioned little business cards with his name engraved, and he only used them when he was mailing a book like God Passes By or Gleanings from the Writings of Bahá'u'lláh or the Baha'i World to someone. The rest of the time, he loved to keep notes on them. He liked to keep notes on very small things. When he wasn't jotting down notes on small business cards, Shoghi Effendi wrote absolutely everything on very small lined notebooks about 8 centimeters wide by 13 centimeters long. Well, I should have had a prop for that. Not very long, not very big. This is how he wrote his notes. This is how he wrote his books. He kept many, many lists in these small notebooks. Actually, the notebooks of Shoghi Effendi would have been the size about the one that's on the screen here. One of the lists that he has, for example, is the days when his newspapers was delivered, places and people that he wrote to, 132 places from 16 December 1922 to 23 February 1923, for example. He wrote vocabulary words, he wrote typical English phrases, and he never, ever trusted calendars. He trusted his little lined notebooks where he manually created his own calendars. And Shoghi Effendi had a very deep love for beauty. He didn't like a lot of things. He liked a very small, narrow range of things. But the things that he liked with all his heart. And he loved them and he was faithful to them. For example, these red brick crushed paths next to green gardens. You know, these are some of the things that he liked. And Ruhiyyih Khanum describes the Guardian's very particular, very specific tastes. His unswerving love for small but deeply satisfying range of things in design, food, clothes, and colors. This is what Ruhiyyih Khanum says. He likes green lawns, red paths, white paths, red geraniums, cypress trees, and of course, a few other things. But I mean, he does not like or want every tree and every flower. No, only just those few and in such and such a place. The same is true of foods. The same is true of colors, of clothes, just a few things. He likes them passionately. He does not want anything else. He never tires of them. It is this almost narrow insistence on one or two themes that has enabled him to build in 20 years such a foundation in the cause. A man of more Catholic, so understand more wide-ranging or less difficult tastes, and temperament could never have done it. Shoghi Effendi's love of Japanese and Chinese art. Although the Guardian had a deep love for a small number of very specific things, he wasn't rigid at all. And he could fall in love with a new type of thing at any moment. For example, this is the story of how he fell in love with these Japanese and Chinese art. The Guardian grew up in a house without any art. And in 1937, he married Ruhiyyih Khanum, who had grown up her entire life with an artist surrounded by all kinds of art, of all kinds of different styles. And her life was filled and suffused and infused with art. So when they got married, William Sutherland Maxwell sent her Japanese kakemonos to decorate her home. Kakemonos are better known as kakejus, hung scroll, are Japanese hanging scrolls of paintings and calligraphy mounted on silk fabric. Before his marriage, Shoghi Effendi had a two-room apartment on the roof of the house of Abdu'l-Bahá, the two rooms that the greatest Holy Leaf had built for him. After he was married, Shoghi Effendi built 3 more rooms, so that Ruhiyyih Khanum, when she received the kakemonos her parents sent her, she hung 3 of them in their sitting room with Shoghi Effendi's permission. And sometimes Shoghi Effendi would go into the sitting room and look at the kakemonos. And one day he told Ruhiyyih Khanum, you know, the more I look at these, the more I think they're beautiful. Something about the kakemonos awakened a deep love in the Guardian's heart for the beauty and the delicacy and the refinement of Chinese and Japanese art. And the Guardian was a very deeply receptive person. And in Ruhiyyih Khanum's word, he just drank it in. And according to Ruhiyyih Khanum, it was that contact with Japanese art that prompted him to furnish the international archives with these very distinctive Chinese and Japanese lacquer cabinets that we're so familiar with now. They came from that. And the Guardian's dedication and love to a small range of architectural styles never meant that he did not develop these same passionate loves for new styles later in his life. As Ruhiyyih Khanum said, as you see with what alacrity, with what life and enthusiasm he responded to anything new that came in his path. So he was a very fascinating person because he had these things that were not a lot of things that he really adored, but he loved them with all his heart. Like, it was a wide range, but he was always open to falling in love with new things as well. He was not narrow-minded, but he knew his tastes. And only a person who knew exactly their tastes could build something like the Shrine of the Bab and the gardens and the archives and furnish the archives and lead the faith, you know, because that confidence and that knowledge of oneself, that we don't have to just like everything. No, we can have passionate feelings about small numbers of things. These were the Guardian's newspapers. One of his great loves in life were newspapers. He had been fascinated with what was going on in the world since he was a teenager, and he carried that into adulthood until the day that he died. Shoghi Effendi read the newspaper to be up to date on what was happening in the world. He read the Times of London, which is the one on the top. He read the Jerusalem Post in Israel. He read the Journal de Genève, and he sometimes had it mailed to him in Haifa. He read the New York Herald Tribune. He would read any paper, but you know what he would do is that he would eliminate the non-essential articles, all the fluff pieces, all the opinion pieces. And he only focused on the pages that he was interested in. So he tore them out. He tore out editorials, world news, world leader articles, and threw out the rest of the paper. And Rúhiyyih Khanum remembered very affectionately that she almost never got the chance in her life to see a complete newspaper, because the Guardian would get to it. He would get only the articles he was interested in. He would rip them up and then just throw out the rest of the paper. And she said that Shoghi Effendi would read the clippings and then he would hand them to her after he was done and say, read this, it's interesting. And so she would take the clippings and she would just stuff them in her bag. And then she said she always had newspaper clippings coming out of her purse. She's just waiting for time to read them. It's just really... Hold on, just give me a minute here. Let me just see where I'm at. Shoghi Effendi inherited from his great-grandfather Bahá'u'lláh and his grandfather Abdu'l-Bahá, and from the side of his ancestors going all the way to the grandfather of the Bab, this love for fairness and this attachment for fairness. And he always checked receipts, and he always bargained to see if he could get things for less of a price. One day he was in a store and found this remarkable fountain that he really loved, and the man would just not come down. And it was just too much for the Guardian. And Ruhiyyih Khanum said, but we have the money. He said, no, it's not. It's too expensive. It wasn't the fact that he had the money and could have paid for it. It was just that there was a fair price for it, and that was not the fair price. And so he went without it. This is sort of similar. I'm going to skip that. On the 28th of April, 1938, Ruhiyyih Khanum, the widow of Abdu'l-Bahá, passed away. And the Guardian sent a cable to the Baha'is of America. She died at the age of 90. And he said, Holy Mother, Ruhiyyih Khanum ascended Abha kingdom. With sorrowful hearts, Baha'i world over recall diverse phases, her rich eventful life marked by unique services, which by virtue her exalted position she rendered during darkest days of Abdu'l-Bahá's life. All Riḍván festivities suspended. Advise convention delegates, holds, devote special session her memory, hold befitting gathering auditorium. Mashrikul Asghar. And on the 5th of December, 1939, Ruhiyyih Khanum's remains were transferred to the Monument Gardens on Mount Carmel. But we will cover that next week, so I'm just going to skip over that. Spring to December 1938, Shoghi Effendi and Ruhiyyih Khanum in Switzerland. This is the time where Shoghi Effendi wrote Advent of Divine Justice, that beautiful letter to the United States and Canada. And it was at this time that there was so much crisis in Europe and so much escalating tension that this line by Shoghi Effendi just shows you what was going on in the European continent at the time that he was there in the summer of 1938. These twin processes of internal disintegration and external chaos are being accelerated and every day are inexorably moving towards a climax. So I want to just talk a little bit before we go about Advent of Divine Justice. It was really a disturbing year. Queen Marie passed away. The war between China and Japan erupted. The Spanish Civil War was ending. Hitler annexed Austria. The Vatican recognized Franco's fascist regime. The Nazis began building concentration camps. Mussolini aligned himself with Hitler. Nazis invaded Poland. They burned 267 synagogues in Germany. And Netherlands closed its borders to refugees. The advent of divine justice is addressed, a long letter, which is a fascinating letter, addressed to the Baha'is of the United States and Canada on acquainting them with their spiritual legacy and their divinely ordained destiny. And there are 6 themes in this, what can be considered like a 77-page poem. The 6 themes are the successes and responsibilities of the North American Baha'i community, the unique station that they have, the tasks that lie ahead of them, the essentials virtues that they need to develop, the first 7-year plan, which was inaugurated the year before, and assurances from the Guardian for their success. I have to get to the next section, so I'm going to let you read this excerpt from Advent of Divine Justice. But, you know, like this picture shows, I just want to read what's on this screen because it's so beautiful. The field is indeed so immense, the period so critical, the cause so great, the workers so few, the time so short, the privilege so priceless. And when you hear it read, it sounds like the beating of a drum. You know, Shoghi Effendi, never forget, wrote everything out loud. So if you want to understand Shoghi Effendi, read it out loud, even if your roommate thinks you're crazy. Just always read Shoghi Effendi out loud. You've seen that I've just skipped a few things here. I want you to go to the chronology. It's 1,300 pages long. I cannot read the whole thing during these time we have on Sundays. The themes that I skipped are Persia and America in the Advent of Divine Justice, why the Bab and Baha'u'lláh appeared in Persia, why America is the cradle of the administrative order, and the corruption of Iran versus America. I'm going to summarize this one real quick. When Shoghi Effendi was writing the Advent of Divine Justice, Ruhiyyih Khanum, a Canadian, protested. She protested. She said to the Guardian, surely Iran is infinitely more corrupt than America. And the Guardian said, no. America was the most corrupt politically. So when Shoghi Effendi saw his young wife's face totally shocked at what he said, how hard it was for her to accept this new vision of this country that she loved, he pointed her finger at her and he said, swallow it. It's good for you. This is all through the months that I was writing the chronology, I kept my own little notebooks. And they were things that I couldn't put in the chronology because they had no date. But they were things that I was deeply in love with. And I did not want to miss sharing. And one of these was Shoghi Effendi's joy and sense of humor. And I kept it specifically for this part because this is a really happy part because this is where he gets married. So I'm going to tell you whatever I can in the minutes that we have remaining. And this will be the last story for the day. The Guardian's laughter. Ruhiyyih Khanum said it was a delight to see him and hear him laugh. He seemed to twinkle like a star when some plan had been successfully brought to a conclusion. His sense of humor was a joy. His eyes would fairly dance with amusement. He would chuckle delightedly, and sometimes he would break into open laughter. Shoghi Effendi's love of teasing. The Guardian maintained a youthful, innocent-hearted quality in his entire life. He enjoyed teasing those closest to him. So when a young pilgrim said they wanted to get married, Shoghi Effendi teased him and said, don't wait too long, and don't wait for someone to fall from the sky. But he loved to tease Ruhiyyih Khanum more than anyone else. And one day he was passing by Ruhiyyih Khanum's office, And she had this really beautiful desk. She had this desk that had like really gorgeous curved, carved wooden legs. And it was a very messy desk. It was covered with papers. And Shoghi Effendi walked by and he said, "Poor table." It's saying, "Look at what a beautiful table I am. Look at what lovely legs I have. And look at how I'm being treated." But he also loved pranks. He played pranks on Ruhiyyih Khanum a lot. Very, very sweet pranks, funny pranks. He liked to tease her. But then the longer they were married, the harder it was for Shoghi Effendi to actually prank Ruhiyyih Khanum. He said, "It's getting very difficult to tease you." But of course, Shoghi Effendi's greatest source of joy always came from the growth of the administrative order. And when he was happy about that, his joy was contagious on a planetary scale. The Guardian could make the entire Baha'i world happy. When he started hearing that there were mass conversions in Bolivia or Uganda, or he one day, he was so happy about a victory of the faith. And he turned to Ruhiyyih Khanum and he said, "If I were happy, you would see what I would do for this cause. Let them make me happy." Dear friends, this is the end for today. Next week is The Guardian, Part 12, 1938 to 1942, the Monument Gardens. But please pass the word. This is the part where Shoghi Effendi returns to Africa and he goes through the country of my childhood, the Democratic Republic of Congo, then the Belgian Congo. He crosses it from the south to the north. So come, I have maps, I have stories, I have all kinds of things. It's going to be so amazing because the Democratic Republic of Congo does not have a night of Bahá'u'lláh, because the person who opened the Democratic Republic of Congo to the faith was the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi. Thank you all for being here. See you next week.